Thank you everyone for joining us for Chef Liron Cooks Passover Memories. I'm here in the Stern Family Teaching Kitchen in the Blaise Bernstein School of Culinary Arts at the Mirage JCC. And today we're gonna go over a few of my favorite Passover recipes. If you have any questions, go ahead and you can feel free to either unmute yourself and ask, or send it in the chat. Julie or someone else will read it to me. Julie is here on the camera with us. She's going to try not making too much faces about the soggy matzah. So we're going to get started. We have a lot that we're going to be doing today. And we're going to start with the flourless chocolate cake so that that can go in the oven while we're doing other things. And now I realized a little bit late in the game, we are making chicken rolls, and we have the caramelized nuts and the chocolate, the flourless chocolate cake that have butter in them. The recipes say butter. You can feel free to use whatever you'd like. I am using a vegan margarine. I will show you what it is that I'm using. This is what I'm going to be using. So I'm just replacing all the butter for this. And then for the topping for the cake, you could either use non-dairy heavy cream, or you could just use powdered sugar on top and not do the ganache glaze if you want to keep it part. So we're gonna get started with the cake. All right, and the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to melt the chocolate together with the butter. It's very soft, it's been sitting out. And I'm going to melt that in the microwave at about 30 seconds at a time. Okay. All right, so we're gonna get this in the microwave, and while this is melting, I'm going to prep our pan. Okay, so for the pan that I'm going to use today, this is, I believe, actually a 9-inch and not an 8-inch. It's okay, it'll just be a little thinner than an 8-inch would be. We're still just looking for the doneness, and I'm going to check the temperature. It'll take a little less time to bake because it's thinner than the 8-inch would be. And I'm using a springform pan here, so I cut the parchment to the size of the pan. And I'm going to first spray the inside of the pan, and then I'm placing the parchment inside, and then I'm going to spray again, making sure that that parchment is sprayed and the sides are well sprayed. We can keep that on the side. All right, and as we're waiting for that to melt, one thing is very important, the cocoa powder. If you see that you have chunks in your cocoa powder, sift it. If you don't sift it before, you're just gonna have chunks of cocoa powder in there that you're not gonna be able to open up, and you'll just have the chunks inside the mixture, and it'll be like little balls of cocoa powder. So sift it before you use it, and that'll help that from clumping up. I'm going to crack my eggs and have them ready, cracking them into a separate bowl so that I can make sure that I don't get any eggshells. This one is being nice to know sometimes chefs have problems with their eggs too.
Was that unsweetened butter, unsweetened chocolate that you melted with the butter, or was it semi-sweet chocolate?
Semi-sweet. But if you prefer that darker chocolate, you can go ahead and use unsweetened. Again, whatever you can get that's parve if you want to keep it parve for a meat meal.
Did the butter have salt in it?
Is the what?
Did the butter have salt in it?
Regular butter, I would use unsalted butter. This one, you know what? Let's see.
Okay.
I don't believe it. Oh, it does have some salt in it. But I'm not sure if it's closer to salted butter or still close enough to unsalted butter.
May I ask, I don't see cocoa in the recipe. Cocoa powder?
Cocoa powder, I think it should be. It's the last ingredient of the cake. It says Dutch processed cocoa powder. Did you find it?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Perfect. All right, so I'm stirring it just to make sure that the butter and the chocolate are getting melted evenly together. We just want it to get nice and smooth. All right, and all the chocolate has melted. I am going to put it in for 20 more seconds just to make sure all the little pieces are melted. All right, and we are going to we have our sugar. I'm using instant coffee. You can use espresso powder if you like, or you can leave it out. So if you don't want that, you can leave it out. The coffee enhances the chocolate flavor. So we're only using 1 teaspoon of the coffee. If you wanted more of a coffee flavor, you could use 2 teaspoons, but this amount is really just to enhance the chocolate flavor, not more than that, kind of like the chocolate, the salt. The salt also enhances the chocolate flavors. All right, so we have our melted chocolate and butter. We're going to add to that the sugar, the salt, the coffee, and the vanilla. I'm going to stir that all together. And this is all being mixed by hand. I'm using a spatula right now. I'm probably going to switch over to a whisk just to get the eggs nicely mixed in and make sure it's all even. If you wanted to, you can switch to a bit of a bigger bowl. You don't have to keep it in this size bowl. All right, we have that all mixed. And now I'm going to add the eggs.
So you didn't have to beat the eggs first?
No.
Is there?
You could beat them lightly before, and that way they'll be at least broken up a little bit, and it'll be easier to incorporate them.
So I read recipes sometimes that say beat the eggs. Is there a certain type of recipe that it requires you to beat the eggs first, or?
Not that I know of. I think that it's just really mixing it in easier and making sure that it just gets mixed in evenly. And that way you're mixing the egg to begin with, and you know that the whole egg is getting mixed in and not parts of the white or the yolk. All right. And the last item that we're going to add to this is the cocoa powder. I don't know if you can tell, I have these whisks that I'm using are silicone, and they're very soft, and they're good for some things, but here it's making it hard because it's kind of staying behind. So I'm just gripping it at the tip to make sure that the whisk is staying in place. Right, and we have our cocoa powder. That's the last ingredient we're going to add.
Does cocoa powder go bad? I've had mine in my drawer for about 2 years. I think this is the only recipe I use it for.
No, it's just still good. All right, cocoa powder tends to go everywhere, so you really do want to do it gently and make sure that it all stays in the bowl. Right, and I'm going to switch back to my spatula just to gently mix it in. Make sure I'm getting everything from the side of the bowl. Now, if I wouldn't have sifted the cocoa powder before, instead of this being nice and smooth, I would have had clumps, and I would have had to try to work it and get all those clumps out. Same thing happens also with powdered sugar. Powdered sugar tends to clump up. So when you're mixing it into things, I would always sift it before. All right, so now that this is ready, taking my prepared pan and I'm just going to pour it in.
If I don't have a, what did you call that? I call it cheesecake pan. You
This
call
is a springform pan.
springform. Is there any other pan options I have?
Yeah, you can use any pan. It really releases very easily. You don't have to worry. You just need to make sure to spray the sides. We're going to flip it over anyway, but you can make it in any pan. It doesn't have to be in the springform pan.
Could you do it in a bundt pan?
I don't think so, because it's not a very sturdy cake. It's very dense because it's flourless. So I don't know that it would necessarily come out nicely. I don't know that it would keep all the grooves and stuff in it. It may just fall into itself after you take it out of the oven.
How important is
Never
the
tried that.
parchment paper? Sorry.
It's important because
Okay.
it'll help it release from the pan, and that way that's why we're also putting spray between the parchment paper and the pan, so that when you flip it over, it'll just come out, and then you just need to take off the parchment paper from the cake. So, but you can just use, I mean, if you don't have parchment paper, then just use spray, but then I would suggest at least a springform pan, because you're only dealing with the bottom of the pan and you can kind of play with that. If you're not using a springform pan, I would definitely recommend using parchment. All right, so we're gonna put that in the oven. I'm gonna set a timer for myself. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes because I want to rotate it in the oven. All right. Okay, and we are going to get started with part of the salad. We're going to do the caramelized nuts. All right, so what we're going to do, we are starting. All right, we're going to use the pecans and the sugar and the butter. So again, this is the vegan butter. I'm going to turn that up. And we want to stir this until it all melts. And then once the sugar and the butter all melts, we're going to caramelize it. We want it to get to a nice golden color. So this is going to start going, and I'm going to have next to me a pan. I'm going to put this pan with parchment on it to be able to take the nuts off once we're done cooking. Now, when you're done with this, you have two options. You can either just pour the nuts down and let them cool and then break them into pieces, or as you're taking them off, you can break them and separate them and have it nice individual mix. They do get very hot though, so you need to have thick fingers, thick skin on your fingers. All right, so this is starting to melt. . All right, and I'm turning the heat up because it's going to take much longer if we have it at a lower heat. The sugar first needs to melt and then it's going to caramelize. And every now and then I'm going to stir it. All right, and we're going to use this as a topping for the salad. Once we have this made, we're going to set it aside and we're going to actually go back to we're going to start the matzo rolls so that while that's cooking, we can cook the warm greens. We're going to go a little bit back and forth, trying to get everything done at the end. All right, so the sugar here is starting to melt.
How high is your heat on that stove?
It's high. Right now it's on 9, which is high heat. But on this isn't as strong as a normal normal stove top would be.
So to melt
The
the
only
sugar,
thing is it's melting the sugar. The only thing is, especially if you're using a smaller amount, this amount of sugar, but the smaller amount you're using, the faster the sugar is going to cook. And if you see you want to lower the heat because you don't want the sugar to burn. So if you feel like it's going too quickly, you need to lower the heat and make sure you can get it done in time.
Since you're making a larger amount, can I take the recipe and double it and then freeze some of them?
I wouldn't freeze them because they're still going to get moisture in the freezer, and sugar does not like moisture, so they're going to get sticky. You can keep it in an airtight container probably for about a week or so in room temperature, but not freeze them. And truthfully, I've started munching on them. They don't stick around for that long. You need to have a lot of self-control not to eat them, or nut-free house.
No, I'm in a free house.
All right, and now there's 2 options. I'm going to add a little bit of salt to this. You can either wait until it's completely cooked to add the salt, or I'm actually going to sprinkle the salt on top now. You don't have to add the salt. It's just if you want a little bit of that flavor, you can use kosher salt. I'm using this Fleur de Sel, which now that I have it, I'm just using it for everything.
And you got that from Amazon?
Yes.
You could do this with walnuts too, couldn't you?
Of course. You can do this with any nut.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna let that caramelize a little more. I'm gonna keep an eye on it. I'm just gonna bring out the ingredients for the chicken so we can talk about it, and we can start with that as soon as the nuts are ready. All right, so for the chicken, what we have here, I have 1 onion. This was a large onion that I chopped. We have olive oil. We have matzo meal. This is the cooked and ground chicken. So you can use either chicken from chicken soup. You can use a roasted chicken. You can just cook chicken breasts and use it. It really doesn't matter. It just has to be, you can also use ground chicken and cook that. But you still want it to be smaller pieces. So I actually took and put in the food processor and cut it so it's very, very fine.
What kind of chicken did you put in the food processor?
This was a roasted chicken.
A roasted chicken.
Yeah. So I just took the amount that I needed from the roasted chicken and then put in the food processor with the metal knife, and it blended it all up. All right, we have eggs. So we're going to use 2 of the eggs for the chicken filling, and 1 egg we're going to use later on to roll it when it's done. Roll it in this egg wash before we fry it. And for that, we have the egg, salt, and water. And of course, the most important part, we have our soggy matzah over here. So I took some towels and I wet them, and I wet the matzahs and put them in between the layers of the moist towels. So the matzah isn't going to be soft right away when you wet it. It sits with the water on it and in between the moist towels, and that's what helps it get nice and soggy, because we want to be able to roll it.
Liron, when I make matzah kugel, it says for wet matzah, is that the same way I should do it? I always just put it in water and crumble it, just like not without the towels or anything. Is that the better way to do it?
For the matzah kugel, because you want it as in pieces, that's totally fine what you're doing. You also don't, for matzah kugel, you still want it to be a little bit crispy. You don't want it to be completely soft. So that's totally fine. That's also kind of what we do for when we make matzah brei. This is really because you're going to see it's basically like an egg roll. I'm going to cut them in half and roll it up, and you really want it to be flexible to be able to roll it.
Liron keeps laughing, by the way, because your videographer back here thinks soggy matzah is about the worst thing in the world.
She keeps on rolling her eyes at me.
I do indeed roll my eyes, and I don't understand. I'm like, just wait a week and have your lasagna next week. We will see if I am wrong. I know we can take bets. Who do you think is going to be right and wrong at the end of this session?
You enjoyed the lasagna last year.
I don't remember.
All right, this is taking a little longer than I had hoped. We're going to give it just another minute or so, and I'm going to, in the meanwhile, start frying the onion. All right, so we're going to use this pan that I have the lid so that once we add the chicken to it, I can cover it. I'm going to start the onion in this one. I'm going to put the olive oil.
Now, do you care if it's extra virgin or not extra virgin?
For this, I believe that this one is regular olive oil. This one is regular olive oil. Because I'm going to be cooking it for a longer time, the extra virgin has a higher smoke point. So I'd rather it be actually the regular olive oil. Sorry, other way around. The regular olive oil has a higher smoke point than the extra virgin. So because we're going to be cooking this for a longer time and it's going to get hotter, I don't want to use the extra virgin. For the wilted greens, we are going to use the extra virgin because we're really just sauteing it just to wilt the greens, and that's fine for that. But for this, because we're really browning the onions and then we're going to add the chicken and cook it, I don't want to have the extra virgin. I want something that has that higher smoke point to it.
So for those of us who have households with one olive oil, which one would you choose?
The regular olive oil, just because it has more flexibility.
Guess I'm going shopping tonight.
All right, and I'm just going to rotate the cake. Make sure it gets even baking. And we're going to set that timer again so that I don't forget about it. All right, and now that our oil is hot for the onion, start with that. All right. Now you can see that the nuts, it's already like a light brown, but I really want it just a little darker. We want to get get that just a little more.
So it can't be on high at this point. What?
It is,
On high?
but then again, it's on high. But with the induction burners, it's a little different than if you were using a regular stovetop, so.
Liron, why are you using those instead of the regular stovetop?
So in this kitchen, to be able to use a regular stovetop, we'd have to turn on this big fan that we have up here, which is very, very, very noisy. And so when we were doing in-person classes, we definitely were using the stovetop, and on the stations, they were using the induction burners. But for the videos, we felt that the sound was really just getting eaten up by that. So we started using the induction burners instead.
Well, why do you not need the exhaust fan for the induction burners?
Because of it's a professional kitchen. If you're using the stovetop, you have to use the fan. They're connected. You can't turn the stove on without that fan.
The gas won't turn on without it. That was the way we had to build it.
Thank you.
So we smell right now chocolate, onion, and nuts and
caramel.
And caramel. It smells delicious.
All right, we're going to continue cooking these. And we want to cook the onion until it gets nice and golden. And you can see once it's already sweating, and so the pieces are getting a lot smaller already. So it's less volume than it was when it was just fresh before it was cooked. I know it looked like a lot of onions. All right. All right, I think we're going to take this out, and we're just going to pour this onto the tray, and later on we'll break this into pieces. All right, so. All right. All that caramel. All right, and we're going to break that up once it's cool. All right, so we're going to continue with these onions. All right, and we're going to cook them just for a little longer. We want them to get a little browner.
Have you ever tried additional ingredients in your roll-up? Like, I don't know, spinach, or I guess it's not that.
I would add it at the end of cooking with the chicken. That way the spinach will get wilted and not overcooked. You can add also some garlic. You can definitely add a little bit more flavoring. spinach would be good. I'm trying to think what
Herbs,
other.
right? Herbs would be good.
Yeah, definitely. It really just depends on the flavoring you want to add to it. This is a great base. You can play around with it and add things to it. And this was also for my mom, especially, this was a way to use the chicken from the chicken soup. Because we always had all that really soft cooked chicken that otherwise would usually just go to waste. All right, we're gonna let this cook just a little longer. I'm gonna turn that heat up a little bit.
May I ask how important the onion is? My husband has a very hard time with onion. If I left it out, would it void the taste a lot?
It will, because if you can tell, it's about equal amounts of onion and chicken. But you know what? I mean, you can try other things. You can try maybe doing some cauliflower rice, leeks. If he's fine with leeks, definitely you can add maybe not as much leeks, of course, as the onions, but you could do like a cauliflower rice with some leeks.
I bet
You
mushrooms.
definitely play around with it a little bit.
You think mushrooms?
Yeah, because mushrooms at least would also add that moisture that you're getting from the onions. The cauliflower is a little drier, so you could definitely add some mushrooms to it as well. Yeah.
Did you say rice? So it would be cooked separately.
Cauliflower, rice cauliflower.
Ah, okay.
All right, so we're going to stir this just for another minute. It's already getting nice and golden. And then we're going to add the chicken to it, and we're going to cover it. I'm going to turn the heat down, and we're going to cover it for about 10 minutes. All right, so the onion looks a nice light golden color. I'm going to add the chicken to it. Okay, we're going to stir that together. Pesto, you could add pesto. You could add pesto as well, yes. All right, so we're gonna lower that heat and cover it. And I'm gonna give it a stir every now and then, but we're just gonna let that sit for a little bit. Okay, we're gonna get the rest of our ingredients for that ready. All right, the timer is going off for the cake. Now I'm going to check it. I'll bring it out so you can see, and I'm going to check it with a thermometer in the center of the cake to see that if it's reached 200 degrees in the center. So it's not, it's definitely gotten some volume during the baking. That's from the eggs. It will flatten out a little bit as it cools, but it's not as thin. All right, and we got that temperature in the center of the cake, and you see that it's come out also clean. And we're gonna let this cool for a couple of minutes before we take it out of the pan. All right, we're gonna set this aside. And we're gonna start with the wilted greens. All right, so for the wilted greens, I have the recipe just so I number, and we're gonna put the timer on for the chicken. All right. So for the wilted greens, I used today a combination of red Swiss chard, green Swiss chard, and mustard greens. They're all cut up already. If you were using kale in addition, the kale does take longer to cook because the leaves are thicker. So for the kale, you would need to first cook the kale separately, and then you can cook the rest of them. So that's the red chard. This is the green Swiss chard. And these are the mustard greens.
You got this at Wholesome Choice?
Yes.
Regular stores carry mustard green?
I think most of them do. Not 100% sure, but I believe that most of them do. All right, so we are going to start with that. All right, so for this, I'm going to heat the extra virgin olive oil, and we're doing this on medium heat because we don't want it to overheat. All right, and I have 2 cloves of garlic that I minced. We're gonna add that as soon as the olive oil is heated up a little bit.
Do you have any opinions on pre-chopped, on the minced garlic, buying the minced garlic in a jar? Or
I mean, I keep that on hand just in case, but I'd rather mince fresh and not use the jarred one. The flavor is a little different on the pre-cut one. I mean, you know, it does have still preservatives and stuff, so I'd rather not use that if I don't have to. All right, so we're gonna add the garlic to the extra virgin olive oil. All right, and we really want that garlic flavors to come out. All right, after the garlic, we're going to add Dijon mustard. We have honey and apple cider vinegar. All right, and apple cider vinegar. All right, so it's either using a whisk or you really want to make sure that all that mustard breaks up and gets mixed in with it. All right, and the last ingredient, really last minute before we add the greens, is going to be the lemon juice. All right, and then we're gonna add the greens. And I'm just gonna do this in handfuls, and I'm gonna use tongs to get the greens out once they've wilted. And we're just gonna do this, we just want them to wilt, and then we're gonna take them out. All right, I'm gonna have a bowl ready to put them in once they're wilted. And by using the tongs to take out what's wilted already, I'm leaving the juices inside the pan for the next round of greens we want to wilt. It really doesn't take long. If you feel like they're wilting too fast and it's getting too soft, just lower the temperature a little bit. Right, obviously you're not going to get everything out. A few pieces may still stay in there. That's totally fine. All right. So you can wait with this, have everything ready, just do it last minute right before you're ready to serve. It really just takes a few minutes to wilt everything and then that's it. And if you had a really large pan, you could just wilt it all in one time. You don't have to do it in bunches. I used a combination of the three, but I used about 2 bunches worth of the greens. So it's not 2 bunches of each kind, it's all together about 2 bunches worth. You can see now that the red Swiss chard is in here. It's starting to color the juices a little bit red. Totally fine, you don't need to be alerted by that. All right, and we'll have one more round. All right, all the rest that we have. All right. So depending on the heat of your pan, it takes about a minute or so to wilt each batch. And if you like it still a little bit crispy, you can just take it out at this point and not let it completely wilt. All right, we're gonna take it all off. I'm gonna add the rest of the juices there. If you see that you have a lot of juices left and you do have more greens you could cook, you can go ahead and cut some more and just cook some more greens. We're going to set this aside. All right. Now, chicken, we're going to check it. All right, it was sticking a little bit, but we're just not going to scrape that bottom part of the pan. That was already brown from the onion, but you can tell that the chicken and the onion have really joined together, and the steaming process, you do see that there was a lot of steam in there, helped it become kind of one mixture. All right, we're just going to give this one more minute and just going to turn it off. In the meanwhile, we're going to flip over the cake and let it cool while we cook the matzo rolls. So for this, so you're going to want to flip the cake directly onto whatever plate you're going to be serving it on. The top of the cake right now is going to be the bottom, and then the bottom is actually going to be the top of the cake. I'm using a small offset spatula, and I'm just taking it around the edges to loosen it.
You just want to show us what an offset spatula is? Thank you.
All right, so it has a bit of an angle. You could use also a straight spatula, it doesn't matter. I just like the smaller ones that aren't as big because it's easy to get around when it's a round surface. So if you were using just a regular pan, you just go ahead and flip it over. So we can just do that, and you can see the springform pan opens up and then the sides come off from it. So we're gonna take this, flip it over. All right, and then we can just peel off that part. All right, and you can see I must have missed one little spot which stuck to the side. I didn't loosen that just as much, so we have a bit of a hole there, but that's totally fine. Okay, we're gonna let that cool. All right. And all right. So at this point, it is better to let this mixture cool a little bit. And I'm actually just going to throw this into the freezer for a minute. And the reason for that is if I add the eggs in right now, it's going to cook the eggs and we're going to have scrambled eggs inside, which would be in a way kind of like a true egg roll. But we don't want scrambled eggs.
Be a breakfast roll.
Yes. All right, so we're going to stick that in the freezer just for a minute. And in the meanwhile, I'm actually going to go ahead and crack 2 of these eggs again into this bowl to make sure that I don't get any of the shells in it. We're going to use this bowl later on also for the 1 egg. So it's okay. There's no issue with that. All right. Okay, and I am going to stir that a little bit just to make sure that the eggs are mixed before I add it to the chicken mixture. And to the chicken, we're going to add the eggs, the matzo meal, and I'm going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. And you know what? I think I'm also going to add a little bit of garlic powder. All right. Okay, so we're going to add the eggs to the chicken mixture. And the matzo meal.
Did you buy it or make your own?
I bought it.
But we could.
Yes, you could just grind up matzo. Salt and pepper. And I'm going to add some garlic powder. All right, and we're going to stir that all together. Okay, and this amount is going to be enough for about 10 of these rolls.
And when you were a kid and your mom served these to you, this was a meal, a snack, breakfast? What was this?
It was either a meal or like a pre-meal, because we also always wanted it as hot as possible, so we'd eat it right when it came out. My mom also usually made a double batch, so she was cooking them for a while. We ended up eating quite a bit of matzah and chicken. All right, so now that this is all mixed together, I'm going to prepare the egg mixture that we're going to dip it into. So we have the 1 egg, salt, and the water. We're going to mix that all together. All right, and I realize I need 1 more pan. All right. Okay, and we're going to heat up some olive oil in this. Again, I prefer to have the regular olive oil and not the extra virgin olive oil. And it's just a little bit to help brown the sides of the matzah and to make sure it doesn't stick. All right, if you're using a non-stick pan, You really just need a tiny bit of the oil just to give it a little bit of color, and you kind of need to move it around to make sure that it gets that oil. The oil tends to clump to itself on nonstick pans and not really evenly disperse on the pan itself. Okay, so we're going to make the rolls. Okay, so I'm taking the matzah and I'm going to fold it in half. And tear them. Okay, and we're going to take this narrow side. I'm going to put a little bit of the filling there.
When you say a little bit, that looks like a lot of filling to me. I mean, that's like 2/3 of a cup or something, yeah?
No, it's closer to like a third maybe. We can measure it. You roll it up. All right, and then before we fry it, we're going to dip it into this egg mixture. So I'm going to do 2 more, then we can get that going in the pan while I do the rest. And you see that you really do want the matzah to be soft enough to be able to roll it.
But it really does not look fragile.
It's not very fragile.
Does it matter what kind of matzah? We use egg matzah. Will that work?
Well, egg matzah has that flavor to it. Egg matzah is a little sweeter.
I'm coming to your house, Betty. I love egg matzah.
That's all we've
love it.
ever had.
I mean, look, I mean, you're dipping this in egg. You could definitely try it. I wouldn't say no.
So what is that? Water matzah?
This is that matzah.
This is just the Passover collection original matzah.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Enjoyed that way since 1888, plain and simple, the way it should be. Just flour and water is what it says. It looks like a whole new marketing job. It looks a little fancier than it has in years past.
All right, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm just rolling this into this egg mixture, taking off any excess and putting it in. To fry that on all 4 sides. Okay. Set this aside. We're going to get that frying, and I want to just show you how to top the cake while this is going. All right. So the cake, we said there's a few options. So if you have the non-dairy heavy cream, or you want to use, you don't care for it to be parve, you can use regular heavy cream. And if you want to do that option, it's the heavy cream and chocolate. You melt it together in the microwave, again, about 30 seconds at a time to make the ganache. We're going to get that going. Maybe. All right. And Julie, can you hand me the cake? Maybe. All right, we have some raspberries we're gonna put on top as well. And you can always just put powdered sugar if you wanted to on top. So you can do the powdered sugar on the outside, add a little bit of ganache, kind of play around with it. And you can either just use straight fresh raspberries and throw them on the top, or you can blend raspberries with a little bit of honey and lemon juice if you like. You can do that as well. A little bit longer. And one important point when you're cutting cakes like this is that you use a hot knife to cut into it so that it cuts nicely. So you want to put the knife into hot water, wipe it dry, and then cut. And you're going to really do that after every single cut so that it doesn't stick to it. if you don't want it to stick to the knife too much. You don't have to go that far. All right, we're gonna stir this a little bit. A little bit more. Okay. Yes, that will be a little hotter. Can you use in this ganache you're making, like an oatmeal or a coconut milk? I've never tried with oat milk. I've tried with coconut milk. I mean, it should work with oat milk as well. I don't know how it would possibly change the flavor. Obviously, with the coconut milk, you're going to get more of a coconut flavor. Once it is all melted, you let it settle for a few minutes. You don't hot. We're gonna put this. You could use half this recipe, or you can have a nice thick layer of ganache. If you do use the thick layer of ganache, you're gonna want it to set for a couple of hours on the cake before you serve it, so that it doesn't just all lose off the pieces. All right.
I saw on TV once one of those, that British baking show, they had a mirror glaze that looked like this, but really
Shiny.
They're extremely shiny.
Mirror glazes usually have gelatin in them.
Gelatin, okay. Do they taste good?
Yeah, but they have gelatin in them. The gelatin is what makes them shiny. You could use the fish gelatin.
Oh.
So I'm just using the spoon to kind of get it as close to the edges as I can. If you don't mind the drips, then you can just let it go over the edges.
Would Bruce Lee mind the drip?
Only if you do the drips all around. All right, so we have that nicely done. All right, and add a few raspberries to that. Or you could do them nicely arranged. All right, or our second option, we're just gonna put some powdered sugar on and then the raspberries.
Again, the staff benefit. Liron makes the dish before she teaches and then when she teaches, and we put that in our employee handbook as a staff benefit.
And again, adding some raspberries on top. All right, let's see how these are doing. All right.
How long would you say that takes to heat through? 10 minutes?
The
matzo rolls? Yes.
Yeah. It's not really heat through because the chicken is already cooked. It's all cooked inside. You're really just crisping up around the edges. And again, I think this is just the fact that it's on the induction burner, that it's taking it a little longer to cook than it should. But you can see you don't necessarily feel it. I can feel it. It's a little crispier already on the edges. And it's a brownish color rather than the white color of the matzah on the bottom. All right, so we're gonna give this another minute on there. We have our cakes here, And we have the wilted salad, the wilted green salad that we're going to add some of our caramelized nuts to it. All right, ready to serve. And the nuts that we made earlier that are here in the bunch, so instead of having them separated, you see they're a nice chunk, and then you just break them up afterwards into whatever size pieces you want. All right, and again, you can just keep these in an airtight container for probably about a week before it got too much moisture in it. All right, let's get this. So in addition, I also set them on their sides. Try to at least. And cook the sides.
Do you need to add oil to that pan, or do you just use a very minimal amount?
Yeah, just a minimal amount. All right. Can do one more side. In the meanwhile, I think Julie, you can try the salad a little bit. And I'll get a piece of cake as well.
I requested the salad, so I'm very excited to, I thought it'd be nice to have some warm greens on a cold winter day. I feel like Popeye. Nice and strong. It's delicious.
Healthy greens.
Delicious. It's delicious. I like it better than I'm a fan of spinach, but I like that a little bit better. I think I like the vinegar in it, just a touch of partner.
Now this ganache obviously did not sit long enough, and so it is spreading a little bit. But let's get a piece of that cake. All right.
Oh, that's beautiful.
All right.
Do you want to try it? Oh, you guys, in April, we're starting to have very, very small intermittent classes. Come and by and take a class with me, and you get to try it too.
That cake looks so good.
And
I'm
easy.
coming. I'm coming for the greens and I'm staying for the ganache.
All right, Julie, you're tasting everything. You're gonna have to try also the matcha.
The chocolate cake was very fudgy. Really, I think it needed that espresso that you put in it, or the little bit of the coffee powder. Very, very fudgy. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna discount something you said. I think the ganache being warm on it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was very, and the one raspberry just really was a good compliment. It was delicious. Very fudgy. I expected it to be cakier, and it was really a delicious texture.
All right, I'm gonna have to flip the camera around here.
Oh, it rained my hair is a mess. It's a rainy day today. Okay, I'm trying it.
The staff is very lucky to come in.
Right? Except for I have been teasing Liron for probably 18 months that I think soggy matzah is the weirdest thing to eat. So,
Plus, you also don't like chicken, so.
there you go. I'm diving in, folks. You'll see. Okay, here we go.
Show us her face, Liron.
She didn't want to.
It rained today. My hair's a mess. It's very crispy. Very chickeny. The salad's fantastic. I think it is, if you like chicken, you'll probably love it. It's especially hot. I think I would like it with like an herb or with a green in it or something.
Add in a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we have here our cakes, we have the salad, and we have our matzo rolls.